Oh, hello. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the big summer Warhammer preview show, guessing and speculating out what's going to come in the big summer Warhammer preview show, which is confirmed to include Kill Team. Now, you might not know it was confirmed to include Kill Team unless you are, in your mid to late 30s and therefore check your email every day. Kids don't read emails. I don't know how they're going to function. Anyway, Kill Team. This graphic was only put out in the mail shot. It wasn't on the Warcom website. So they've confirmed that we're getting stuff for 40k, Horus Heresy, Old World, Legions Imperialis, Underworlds, Kill Team, and Age of Sigmar. So this is what I consider to be the 6 core games that Games Workshop supports the most voraciously, plus Legions Imperialis. So the way I view, and maybe this is not correct, the way I view the Games Workshop stable of games is that they have 40k and Age of Sigmar, right? And then they got 40k for boomers, i.e. the Horus Heresy, and Age of Sigmar for boomers, i.e. the Old World, of course using boomers in the generic people in their late 30s to early 40s, not actual boomers, don't misunderstand. And then they've got kind of skirmish Age of Sigmar, which is Warhammer Underworlds, and skirmish 40k, which is of course Kill Team. And that is how I think Games Workshop are consolidating their main portfolio of games. And then all the other stuff, Legions Imperialis, Blood Bowl, Necromunda, it is more on the periphery. And the reason I think I'm going off on a mad tangent, but I'm going to do it anyway. The reason I say they focus on those three is those are the 3 games that get FAQ pushes and updates, and that they get support other than new products. Right? When did you last see an FAQ for Necromunda or Legions Imperialis? You didn't. Now, what's interesting is what's not in that list, and what I don't consider one of their 6 core games would be. I will just add, Lord of the Rings gets FAQs. Lord of the Rings is kind of super its own thing, often its own little weird category where no one understands what's going on. As far as I can tell, worked on by actual hobbits in a basement in Games Workshop in a team that communicates in no way with any of the other teams. Regardless. What's not on this list is Warcry. For a while, awkwardly, they had Warcry and Underworlds. And there was a bit of a will they, won't they, because it was very obvious to a lot of people that they were going to drop one of those 2 games because, this town, by which I mean Games Workshop's sort of sales and tournament data, there just wasn't enough people playing either game to really support both. And everyone was like, well, they're not going to drop them both because they need to have a skirmish fantasy game, right? Because then where do the people that want to desperately play a low model count fantasy game go? They're going to go for another company. That would be bad. Which one are they going to keep? Which one are they going to drop? It looks like they've come down on the side of Underworlds, rightly or wrongly. Maybe wrongly, but that's what they've done. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, they did a video with hats, and each of the hats is supposed to be, or is implied to be in the video, a subtle hint as to what's coming. And so, being as I'm a Kill Team channel, I've opened with Kill Team Necrons versus Deathwatch, because it's been rumored for a while from Valrak and others that we're getting Necrons versus Deathwatch, and Deathwatch has as close to something can come to being hard confirmed by a baseball cap. Deathwatch has been hard confirmed by a baseball cap, because all of the other hats, they seem to have walked into their local Smithies, or which is a toy shop in the UK, and just grabbed random Halloween costume hats, right? But the Deathwatch cap there is actually a piece of licensed Warhammer thing that you can buy or could buy at some point, and that is the Deathwatch logo. It just is. So Deathwatch are definitely confirmed, and then given the context of the rumors that we've had that we're getting a Deathwatch versus Necrons Kill Team box, I'm choosing to interpret the Pharaoh's headdress as representing the Necrons. Now, yes, It could represent Tomb Kings. It could, which was my very first thought. Sorry, no, my very first thought was Thousand Sons. Other people have said it's going to be Tomb Kings. I don't think it's going to be either Thousand Sons or Tomb Kings because they've just had really big releases relatively recently. So I think this is Deathwatch versus Necrons coming. I think that's going to be the Kill Team release. I think it's going to come with terrain. Some people seem certain it's going to be Necron themed terrain. I think that's less certain. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it was Necron terrain, but I wouldn't be like that surprised if it wasn't Necron terrain. Like, don't get me wrong. Necron Tomb World, Deathwatch investigating it, accidentally waking up all the Necrons start going all horror movie on you, is a really perfect narrative, and that's almost the problem. If you look at Kill Team boxes, they're never actually this perfect narrative pairing in this perfect setting. They're often just like, and also these guys. So we'll see. But I do think Necrons versus Deathwatch, the two teams, is what's likely to come in that box. That's really exciting. Not that anybody cares because the Warhammer heroes look super generic, but if Deathwatch Space Marines come out, there's no oxygen in the room for people to really get excited about that Warhammer Heroes Dark Angels team, is there? Because all the people who just love Space Marines, which is some 60 to 70% of the player base, are going to be all over the Deathwatch, surely. You're going to be a real hipster, right? Like a real narrow, because the hipsters are out there playing, I love Xenos, so I'm going to play the Necrons. I'm gonna play Kroot, right? But like, a real fine line there. But I'm going to play the shiny new Space Marine team. Oh, the Deathwatch? No, the other one. And then we'll talk about Age of Sigmar. So there's no one hat that seems to signify the Chaos Dwarves, but I think the fact that they've chosen hats to be their gimmick signifies Chaos Dwarves, because Chaos Dwarves famously, here's an old illustration of a Chaos Dwarf. Chaos Dwarves famously had stupid hats. They've confirmed in the article that there's a brand new army coming for Age of Sigmar. Okay. We've got this preview image from long ago of something coming in the distant future, which wiser heads than me have said, oh yes, that's Chaos Dwarves because it's green. I don't understand. But apparently if you zoom in and you enhance and you this and you that, people who are more in tune with Age of Sigmar than me have said, oh yes, that's Chaos Dwarves. So good. Wow. I see that I left. For those of you that don't know, I constantly re-edit my PowerPoints to avoid doing the backgrounds and layout again. I see I've left the bullet point sucks to suck Vespid in this presentation. I mean, that's not relevant to anything, but it does suck to suck Vespid, so congratulations. But yes, the whole hat thing is a meta clue to tell us that we're getting Chaos Dwarves. So Chaos Dwarves for Age of Sigmar. I would have thought Chaos Dwarves had a more natural home in the old world because they're the very quintessential. If the old world is Warhammer for boomers, Chaos Dwarves are like the only people who are like sitting in their houses going, "Oh gosh, when are Chaos Dwarves coming out?" are of a certain vintage, right? So it makes me think that the Chaos Dwarves are going to be a very reimagined kind of Chaos Dwarf because they're putting them in Age of Sigmar and they're going for people who want them because they're cool, not because they're nostalgic for the original thing. But I could be wrong. They might go full nostalgia bait. Maybe they're trying to pull. You know how Games Workshop infights between its studios? Maybe the Age of Sigmar guys are trying to pull some people away from the old world guys to boost the Age of Sigmar numbers so they get a case of beer at the company Christmas party. I don't know what it is. Now, Flesh Eater Quartz, I think, will be also revealed for Age of Sigmar. This is because, so I'm saying that this is what's coming for the sort of top hat, sort of Mr. Monopoly nobleman top hat, and it's a bit of a reach. But basically, if you're familiar with Flesh Eater Courts in like the lore of Age of Sigmar, they believe they are nobles, like kings, queens, knights, gentry, in the Bretonian court. Well, it's never outright said in the Bretonian courts, but in a kind of court-like setting, right? And so I think it might be a bit of a deep cut, but I think the top hat that we see twice, actually, we see this hat twice in the presentation, right, might be a reference to nobility. And therefore a reference to the Flesh Eater Courts, because Games Workshop's marketing department is also really, 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 really into this particular facet of the Flesh Eater Courts. Okay, and then the reason I've gone Flesh Eater Courts is because we had this little picture a while ago, this black and white one there labeled on the horizon, and this seems to be from this piece of artwork. Now, I think it's zoomed out a bit more and cropped differently, but I think Flesh Eater Courts is getting a pretty phoned in, right? A pretty phoned in Age of Sigmar release where it's the same codex art, I think slightly zoomed out and cropped slightly differently, so we see a bit more of the wing. And then like there'll be a guy, right? There'll be probably be quite cool, but there'll be some kind of guy, and that'll be it. That'll be a Flesh Eater Courts release. We know the format. You know, some releases people get to really feast. You're doing a whole new army in the Chaos Dwarves, so therefore the Flesh Eater Courts are in they sort of paying the price for that, right? In terms of the number of plastics. So I think I'm going to say we're getting a Flesh Eater Courts book and a dude. So for 40k, I think Leagues of Votan are on the way. A couple of reasons for thinking this. So Leagues of Votan, as far as I'm aware, we are in the sort of twilight of the current edition of 40k. I'm not super into it, so if I say anything stupid, please do correct me in the comments. But 40k has two big codexes left, Votan and Dark Eldar. Now, the Leagues of Votan are explicitly NASA punk, right? I don't know many secrets from Games Workshop, but I was talking to somebody who works at Games Workshop about the Leagues of Votan and why I didn't like them, very patiently listening to me. And I mentioned that, you know, you're going for the whole NASA punk vibe, blah, 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 blah. And he actually said, yes, NASA punk was the word in the middle of the big board when we were brainstorming the Leagues of Votan. So certainly, whether or not you think they've carried off that vibe or not, right? If you've played Starfield, I think the RPG, right? That's also got a NASA punk aesthetic, and it's this idea that you're going to have, you know, moon landing style space. It's like steampunk, but further. Do I really have to explain this? It's like how steampunk is the age of steam, but then technology kind of stagnates and advances. Same deal, but with the moon landing, and then technology kind of stagnates and advances in a weird way. And that's Leagues of Votan. Did I need to explain NASA punk to the audience? Let me know if that was helpful in the comments. And so what I'm trying to explain in the most roundabout way possible is that's why Adam Troke has a foam spaceman hat on to represent the Leagues of Votan, even though the Leagues of Votan do not themselves often wear actual space. Some do, but like the characters don't. I think this preview image also is a Votan fellow. This has been out for a while. I don't have a handle on 40k to the extent of saying they're going to get loads, they're going to get one miniature, blah, blah, but there's going to be a book and there's going to be one or more models. And so that's my prediction there for 40k Leagues of Votan. Now, I don't think they're going to just do one thing. I put a question mark because we're getting to things I'm less sure about. Harlequins. Now, Harlequins are in a weird spot. They've got a couple of really nice characters and a really nice plastic kit. The Games Workshop doesn't want to drop them totally, but they no longer have their own codex. They're kind of fully absorbed into the Craftworld Eldar book. So is there a world in which they're releasing a second unit for Harlequins? Like, or not a second unit because they got the jet bikes as well, but like another unit, another infantry for Harlequins, like the Mimes or something like that. And then that could come, and that could be like part of the, because we know the Dark Eldar Codex is in the wind, it could ultimately be part of the Dark Eldar release. I know the Dark Eldar are also getting Lady Malice, because that's been leaked for ages. But then, like, the Dark Eldar Codex comes out with its one model, but then also around the same time, new Harlequin unit, the unit's in the new Dark Eldar Codex, and then a PDF comes out for the Craftworld players. I could see that playing out. That's a lot of inventing based on just a Jester's hat, and it could be something else that a Jester's hat is. It could be for the Old World. Or it could, they could be bringing back for the Bretonians Giles de Jonglei, I want to say. Jester, right? And those metals could be returning. They're quite valuable on eBay at the moment, I think. So that could be a thing. They had like a Friar Tuck analog, and then there's the Jester fella, and a couple really characterful models. So it could be that. It could be like one of the war bands for Underworld is based on the carnival of Nurgle. If you remember that from Wartime, like the Nurgle guys with the jesters' hats and the bells and the frolicking, and then also the plague, right? So I'm going to stump for Harley Quins, but like I'm not that sure. It could be any of those other things I just mentioned. Bit of a deep cut if they bring back Giles de Jonglei, but that's what the old world's for, right? Speaking of things that I'm pretty well pulling out my backside, is a pirate hat with a little skull on it. Are they going to do the Vampire Coast for the old world? Because the thing is, first of all, to be clear, I would have a really hard time not buying the Vampire Coast for the old world if it came out. I set myself a rule that I was only going to do one army for each big army game system because I never played big army games. But like pirate vampires and pirate skeletons, that's a bit cool. The reason I say this is if you don't know, in the not what's it called? I've written Warhammer: The Old World. Warhammer Total War, right? Warhammer Total War, and you can read all about this on Warcom. Is this whole thing where they have loads of extra armies in there, of which Cathay was one, and a lot because of the way that the Total War people worked with the Warhammer Studio. Like the Warhammer Studio made whole like army books essentially for conversion into Total War. At least that's what they've said on Warcom now. Zimbad was telling me that the Total War people said something different on their dev blogs, but like there's literally a Warcom article quite recently that said exactly this. So I presume there's a grain of truth to it anyway. And so that implies that it will be reasonably straightforward for them to do the other weird extra armies that exist in the Total War game, of which Vampire Coast is one. Vampire Coast are pirates and then I know the skull and crossbones is a generic symbol for pirates. I know that I'm reaching, but I just think it would be cool. So maybe that's something they're gonna do. Yeah, and then I'd have to. I don't know because I got some Chaos Warriors, but Vampire Coast would be cooler than Chaos Warriors. What are you gonna do? I could sell the mostly unpainted Chaos Warriors army and buy vampires instead, and still lose money. But it's not really about the money; it's about having space in my house that isn't full of Warhammer. A real problem. I need to make the ultimate hobby purchase, which is a larger house. So if anybody would like to PayPal me the like £1 million you need to buy a house in this country these days, that would be great. And then we got the 3 brown hats. It's funny to me that I looked at all the hats. I got no strong feelings about these 3 brown hats. We got a cowboy hat, we got a wizard's hat, and then we got like a good guy navy hat, maybe, or like a different kind of pirate hat, like in a more like the reason I said, this one makes me think Vampire Coast is because it's like cartoon pirates. This one is like a more grounded kind of navy buccaneer hat, cowboy hat, wizard. I choose to believe, by the way, that these 3 hats are just hats that Adam Troke has because they look really nice and leathery and not therefore purchased by the marketing department for use in a single gag. Like I bet these are just things he has in his house. You'll notice as well if you watch the video that Adam Troke, who my read on the situation is that he loves fun and joy more than the other fella who is more of a manager, right? And I think he probably just had these hats, right? Because he wears the majority of the hats in the sketch in his house. I think at least 2 of these represent Warhammer Underworlds teams because Warhammer Underworlds is like Warhammer Underworlds is always just like here's 5 random guys, and then they're going to fight 5 other random guys, and then right, and it's really hard to guess what the Underworld warbands are going to be, because they're very rarely are they just here's a straightforward thing from the big game, and they're very often like, oh yes, here are the here's a guy who makes Frankenstein zombies out of electricity and corpses, and it's like, is that even a Warhammer thing? That sounds like a Malifaux thing, but here it is. So maybe there's going to be wizards versus navy guys, and then how do cowboy? One of these hats doesn't belong in Underworlds, because I don't think we're going to get more than 2 things for Underworlds. So there's at least something else that I haven't picked out for one of these. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think if you've got a better read on the brown hat situation. But that's my best guess. And then you may reasonably ask, what about Space Marines? So there's nothing in the collection of hats that we've seen. There's nothing that screams Space Marine to me. But they said the line models books and some armored guys with bolt guns. So they basically confirmed that there was Space Marines coming. Now, they could be 40k Space Marines. They could be Horus Heresy Space Marines. But we also know that we're expecting Salamanders and Imperial Fists from the other things that they previewed at their last stream next to the thing that I think is Votan. We've got clearly Salamanders and Imperial Fists. So there's no hat, I think, unless you think going back and looking at them, you think, oh no, you've missed a trick here. That hat doesn't correspond to what you said. It corresponds to the Imperial Fists in some way. Let me know. They also had the text in the article, is Age of Sigmar's great and all, but you have some new cool stuff for other games shown in the preview. You bet your bolter we do. Nobody says you bet your bolter we do, unless they're implying that the text on Warcom is increasingly annoying me. I think it's because I'm getting old, but sure. You bet your bolter we do. Space Marines again. Other people wield bolters occasionally, but it's unlikely the Sisters of Battle are getting a new unit, right? So I think it's going to be Space Marines again. And this thing in the far future with the backpack looks a lot like a Space Marine as well. So, yeah, strong indication there's going to be something for the Space Marines, even if I can't tie it to a particular one of Adam or Eddie's hats. And then Horus Heresy. I didn't make any predictions of the Horus Heresy. They already basically told us that they're going to do plastic Custodes, and they showed us the fully painted tip of a Custodian Guardian Spear. Now, technically, the Custodians, would they fill the brief of armored guys? Is it a bolter when it's on the end of a Guardian Spear? I hear persistent rumors that 40k is marching towards trying to phase out all resin, which I don't quite believe, because they keep releasing new resin things for the old world, like random wizards and characters and other bits. But I can see that they want to bring, if you remember the great divorce between Forge World and Games Workshop, and they said, oh, but we're not, but Custodes and Imperial Knights are going to remain the exception, and all their Forge World stuff legally in 40k and vice versa. I can see that stuff, like some of those big resin Custodes tanks. I can see the jointly them wanting to make those plastic and things like that. So I can see a world where Custodes get plasticized, and maybe they're going to talk about that, because they already started to talk about it on Warcom. So maybe that's going to be the big Horus Heresy in the preview. I haven't said anything for Legions Imperialis, because I don't understand Legions Imperialis. I don't care about it. If you know what's on the rumor mill for Legions Imperialis and whether that corresponds to any of the hats that we've seen, then please do let me know. And that's it. What do you think of my predictions? If you want to add any of your own, pop them in the comments for me. If you think I'm hideously wrong, and to be honest, outside of Kill Team, I'm pretty out of touch with what Games Workshop is doing with all of its other games at the moment. So there you go. In terms of my coverage of the preview, so I'm not live streaming it, right? I'm going to live blog it on the Discord. So for those of you who've never joined the Discord, I will create a room, we'll chat in the room, and I will paste in screen grabs from the preview show, and I will type my things that I notice that they say in their rambling that seem significant. And there's two reasons I do that. The first is that it helps people who can't watch it because they're at work or whatever. Secondly, it provides me with my notes that I'll need to then go and make the video, right? Because what we do then, we do that, and then we go to Warcom and look at that stuff, and then we mash the two together and make a video. And the reason I don't live stream and live react it is because Warhammer preview show live streams really annoy me. Because, to be fair, if it's somebody like Andy, right, and because he did one once, I will watch it probably like a week afterwards, but I want to watch the preview show myself in monastic silence, listening to every word that is said. I want to enjoy the experience of a preview show. I don't want to be wobbling over the top of it and reading chat and doing other things. And I don't really like that experience when other people do it. I want to hear the thing, not the commentary on the thing. So you make the kind of content you want to see more of in the world, right? Do subscribe, comment, like, etc. Join the Discord, especially if you want to see the live blog for the big summer preview show. Okay. Big thank you to all my members, but especially to Alex, who is subscribed at the highest tier. Cheers, Alex. It is very much appreciated and a great help. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you again, maybe on Monday. Otherwise, there should be a hobby stream on Tuesday, unless the unseasonable heat returns. But at the moment, it's looking like we're going to have a hobby stream on Tuesday. Yeah, have a good one. Bye bye. Bye bye bye. Bye bye bye. Goodbye. Bye bye bye. Bye bye bye.